Hello, good morning, everyone. The CBSE as well as NEET focused practical oriented concept I would like to explain to you. Dear children, this structure, what you see here, is human skeleton system. Okay, so this human skeleton system is very vital for various reasons, without which you cannot stand erect, you cannot walk properly, you cannot sit properly, and your posture is very much determined by this skeletal system. This system enables us to walk, and it protects all the internal organs of our body, and it provides joints which act like a fulcrum to perform a work. That is, muscle generates due to its contraction a force. That force has to be converted into work. I mean mechanical work. That we have to walk, or we have to talk, or I have to lift the pan, like that. So for that, it acts like a fulcrum. In lever, first order, second order, third order lever, you have a point called fulcrum. That fulcrum is provided by the joint. So without joints, you cannot bend, you cannot sit, you cannot do small exercises and whatnot. So let us understand all the finer points of this skeletal system. This skeletal system is basically made up of bones and few cartilages. And how can you distinguish a bone from a cartilage? A cartilage is very pliable, highly elastic. It is like the ear pinna, nose tip. These are all the few things which is very visible for you to understand. Whereas cartilages are also present between the vertebrae in a vertebral column. And also hyaline cartilage is present in the sternum, between the sternum and the ribs. Fine. What exactly this skeletal system classification is like? And before I start that, let me tell you, bones are very hard. And this hardness is due to the presence of calcium salts in it, and also osteocyte cells. Whereas cartilage is pliable and highly elastic, and also it can bear the stress, and that is provided by the chondroitin salts present in them. Now, this skeletal system is classified into two. What you see as a central one, that is called as axial skeleton, and these forelimb, that is arm, and also legs, these are called as the appendicular skeleton. So totally there are 206 bones present in our body, of which 80 bones are shared by the axial skeleton, which includes skull, and then the vertebral column, ribs, hyoid bones. Okay, so let me explain you one by one. First, let me take um, the skull. So in the skull, you see here, yes. Well, I have dismantled this, so everything has come off. You can find in the skull. So you have what is called as the two piece here. The front one you can see, yes. You can see here, this is the skull. Here you have the front, the facial bones, and at the back, on the top, you find the cranial bones. Totally, there are 22 bones, and the cranium, which houses brain, has the 8 bones, while the facial bones are 14. In the front, you have frontal, and then at the top, you have parietal. At the back, you have occipital. And you have ethmoid, sphenoid, and temporal bone, which houses the what you call as the ear cavity, inside which you find the 3 bones, malleus, incus, stapes, which are very smallest bones in our body. And here you have orbitals, you have nasal, and you have immovable maxilla and the movable mandible. You can see I can simply move like this. Okay, so this is mandible bone, and at the bottom you have a U-shaped single bone called hyoid. So that is about the skull, which contains cranial 8 and the facial bones 14. Then we take up the vertebral column. This vertebral column you find, see, let me dismantle like this. Yes. So here you have 1, 2, some bends are there. This is 26-piece bone, and here we find in the neck region you have cervical, and then in the chest region at the back you have thoracic, and then the last but one called as that vertebral column part is called as lumbar. Then finally you find two area called sacrum and coccygeal. So totally you find cervical, thoracic, lumbar, then sacral and coccygeal. 5 part area is there. And the division is like this. The cervical bone invariably has 7 pieces in all the mammals, and then for what you call as attachment purpose, at the back we find the 12 thoracic vertebrae, followed by the what you call as 5 lumbar, and then 1 sacrum and the coccygeal. So this is how the sacrum and coccygeal are fused bones. Totally you find the 26 vertebrae. In between vertebrae, we find a cushion-like structure called as the cartilage. Well, this skull actually articulates like this. Now I am just holding this. Here we have 2 clamp-like structure called as the dicondylic skull. In lower vertebrae, we find the monocondylic. So we can find this is 180-degree turning. I think rotation is possible here in the dicondylic attachment. So this is fitting with the first vertebrae called as atlas, and then we find axis. And between atlas and axis, we find a joint called as pivot joint, which provides the 180-degree movement. Fine. Then let us understand the rib cage. So in the rib cage, we find the front, a flat bone called a sternum, and on left and right side, we find the ribs. So totally 12 pairs of ribs are there. The 1 to 7 pairs, they are called as true ribs because they make a direct attachment with the sternum, while the 8, 9, 10 are called as the vertebrochondral ribs because they don't directly attach with the centrum, while they make attachment with the 7th pair of ribs, and they get attached to the sternum. So indirect connection. While the 11 and 12 pairs, they are simply free. There are no ventral attachment, and they are called as the floating ribs. Well, as we have seen, the skull, it has a dicondylic structure. At the back of the, front sternum, at the back we have vertebral column. The ribs on dorsal side, they have what you call bicephalic structure with which they are attached with the vertebral column. And each vertebrae, I must tell you, they have a central canal through which the spinal cord passes and till the uh, sacral end region. Well, so that sums up the axial skeleton. So you have the breakup like this. We find 22 bones in the, the head region, cranium plus facial, the skull, and then one sternum, one hyoid, and six ear ossicles, and three on either side of the ear, and in each ear. And of course, we find the 24 ribs. Okay, all these make up the 80 number with regard to the axial skeleton. Coming to the appendicular skeleton, in the appendicular skeleton, we find the 126 bones, the remaining 126, that is 206 minus 80, it is 126. There you have in each limb 30 bones are there, whether it is hand or leg. Well, and also we find the pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle. Here we find the, that is the pectoral girdle. Okay, so let me show like this, then you will easily understand. So this is how the pectoral girdles present. Well, okay, this is pelvic girdle, and here we find the pectoral girdle. So on the top we find the shoulder region, we find the pectoral girdle on either side. Now first let me tell you the bone arrangement in the hand. Here you can find the, yes, this is how it is attached. Well, so first let me tell you the pectoral girdle. Here we find two flat bones, triangular bones, and these are called as scapula. The scapula starts in the second vertebrae and ends in the seventh vertebrae, and one side of the scapula, it raises it a ridge called a spine, and that protrudes beyond that, that is called as acromion process. And that acromion process encloses what is called this one and the collarbone. Well, so we find another one is called as collarbone, collar and scapula, and on the lateral side they form a cavity called as glenoid cavity. Inside the glenoid cavity, this head of the humerus, it fits and it can move like this. This is once again 180-degree, and this is called as ball and socket joint. Okay, so each hand you have upper humerus and then radius and ulna, and then we find the uh, wrist region, which is called a carpals, and then the palm region called metacarpals, and then we find the phalanges. So here the arrangement is wrist contains the 8 bones and the palm contains 5, and here we find totally 14 bones are there. And in the case of wrist, we find the gliding joint, and then we find in the metacarpals and the thumb region what we called as the saddle joint. Okay. Yes, the here what you come across is the coxal bone, and here another coxal bone. They form pelvic girdle, and each coxal bone is made up of ilium, ischium, and pubis, and that is ventrally they are joined with a pubic symphysis, which is fibrous structure. Okay, and that encloses the pelvic cavity. Now in this pelvic girdle, here we can find, yes, so this is how it is attached. This is called as acetabulum. In the acetabulum, the head of the femur, which is the longest bone in our body, fits. And then you have patella, and of course tibia and fibula. And here this is ankle region, and then you have sole, and finally we find the phalanges. So here again, it is called as the tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges. Here instead of in the the ankle region, 8, only we have 7. The one patella is present here, and then 5 sole or foot, and then phalanges. Once again, like in the fingers, here also the toes are, I mean, toe bones are 14 in number. Well, so this is once again shows the ball and socket joint. Well, once we complete the study of the skeletal system, uh, it is better to know the joints. Without joints, we cannot bend, we cannot affect any movement in our body. What are joints? Joints are the places or the points where bone and cartilage meet, or bone and bone meet, and they actually provide the moving area actually. Joints are of three types. Okay, so the joints, one is called as the fibrous joint, the second is called as the synovial joint, and then cartilage joint. Of these three, the maximum movement or considerable movement, or you have the maximum movement you can find in the synovial joint, while little movement is seen in the case of the cartilage joint, while no movement at all whatsoever is seen in the fibrous joint. The fibrous joint we come across the skull bones between the parietal, occipital, frontal, temporal, because that is the very what you call as high risky area. There the cranial bones, they house the brain. That is why, like a sutures, they are present in the in between the flat bones, irregular bones. So they are called a fibrous joint. They never allow any movement whatsoever. While the cartilage, that is joints which are present in between the vertebrae of individual vertebrae of vertebral column, they provide little movement, and that you can find in the case of vertebral column. In between vertebrae you find the um, cartilage pieces. Well, the maximum movement is performed by the synovial joint, because a synovial joint is as if a synovial cavity fluid filled with the synovial fluid, in which two articulate end of the bones they meet and they affect movement. And since there is a synovial fluid, it provides something, some sort of a that is like a grease effect in the mechanical automobile parts. Same way here, the synovial joint provides the maximum movement. And what are the synovial joints where you can find in our body? See, the synovial joint is very interestingly seen between the atlas and the axis, that is the pivot joint. In this case, the head moves by the dichondric arrangement. So there in the cervical, the region that is found, that's a synovial joint. That is the only joint they found. Otherwise, all in all other places we find the cartilage joint. Of course, ball and socket joint is seen in the case of the pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle. And as we have just discussed or shown you, in the case of wrist, we can find the gliding joint, and in the what you call palm region and the thumb, we can find the saddle joint. Okay, and hinge joint is seen in the case of knee region and also in the elbow region. So this is what the entire skeletal system is like. I hope I have made my point very clear to you. In subsequent classes, let us understand whatever related to the CBSE and NEET practicals. Bye bye. Thank you.
RGRல நீட் கிளாஸ் படிச்சீங்கன்னா கவர்மெண்ட் கோட்டா சீட்டு உறுதிங்க. இல்லைன்னா நீங்க கட்டக்கூடிய ஃபீஸ் ரீஃபண்ட் பண்றோம். எப்படின்னு பாக்குறீங்களா? 20 ஸ்டூடெண்ட் தாங்க ஒரு பேட்சுக்கு. 16 மென்டர்ஸ் வந்து 20 ஸ்டூடெண்ட்டுக்கு சப்போர்ட் பண்ண போறாங்க. 6 மணில இருந்து நைட்டு 10:30 வரைக்கும் இந்த கிளாஸஸ் போகும். இதுல நீங்க ஒருத்தரா இருக்க போறீங்களா? ஜாயின் RGR அகாடமி. 12th முடிக்கிறப்பயே நீட் JEE கிராக் பண்ணணும்னு நினைக்கிறீங்களா? ஜாயின் RGR அகாடமி. எப்படின்னு பாக்குறீங்களா? ஸ்கூல் போயிட்டு ஈவினிங்ல கிடைக்கிற டைம், சண்டே கிடைக்கிற டைம் நீங்க இன்வெஸ்ட் பண்ணீங்க அப்படின்னா உங்களுடைய பிசிக்ஸ், கெமிஸ்ட்ரி, மேக்ஸ், பயாலஜி 4 சப்ஜெக்டையும் கத்துக்கிட்டு நீட்டையும் JEEயும் அழகா கிராக் பண்ணலாம். கான்செப்ட் கிளாரிட்டி கிடைக்கும், அப்ளிகேஷன் ஸ்கில்ல டெவலப் பண்ணிக்கலாம், ப்ராப்ளம் சால்வ் பண்ற எபிலிட்டி வரும். இது மூலமா உங்களுக்கு நாலேஜ் கிடைச்சு அதை அழகா எக்ஸாம் பேட்டர்ன்ல ட்ரைனிங்கும் கொடுத்து டெஸ்ட்டும் கண்டக்ட் பண்ணி +2 முடிக்கிறப்பயே கிராக் பண்ண வைக்கிறவங்க RGRல ஜாயின் பண்ணுங்க. கால் 8695186953.